This show is produced by the Harwood Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris, and we love making this show available to you free of charge. If you'd like to help us keep it that way, make a contribution to our Karma Jar or become a show sponsor. To learn more, visit our website. Well, I fired up the Alfresco Imports Beehive Oven, and today I've baked a Tuscan flatbread, and we're dipping it in this delicious sun-dried tomato dipping sauce. You know, I'd never cooked with a wood oven before, and I'm so fortunate to have been able to partner with Alfresco Imports and their Beehive Oven. In fact, check their QR code here on the right side of your screen, and you can use your smartphone to go right to their website and see all that they have to offer. You can also make this flatbread in your oven just by using a pizza stone. But however way you do it, it's nice and crispy on the top, nice and soft in the center, and it's delicious dipped in the sun-dried tomato dipping sauce. Now for this flatbread, we do make a yeast dough, much like a pizza, but I'm going to be making it with a lot less yeast, and here's why. With this flatbread, I'm actually going to let it rise in the refrigerator, and you can go anywhere from about 3 hours up to 24 hours, which is really kind of nice because you can make your dough well in advance. And what's happening is instead of doing sort of a quick rise, like when I proof it in the microwave or I leave it out on the counter, by putting it in the refrigerator, the yeast is going to develop slower and you're going to get sort of a more rich yeasty flavor in this flatbread, which is what we want. So we're going to do a cold rise, they call it, by putting it in the refrigerator, and when you do that you don't use as much yeast. Now I'm going to be using my standing mixer with the dough hook on it, but if you don't have one of those, you can certainly just use a big bowl with a wooden spoon and that will work fine. First we're going to measure out the flour, and for this flatbread I'm going to measure out 4 cups of flour. Now because we're going to let this rise so much longer, we don't need as much yeast. So I'm going to measure out just 1 teaspoon of dry yeast, then 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now this is all the dry ingredients, and I like to take my spatula and just mix those together before I start putting the wet ingredients in. And we have 1.5 cups of warm water, and you will want to take the water's temperature. It needs to be about 110 degrees. And then we'll put that right in the bowl, along with 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Now I'm going to lower the dough hook and put it on a medium speed and let it mix until that dough starts to come together. Now if you're not using a mixer, just use your wooden spoon, and again you want to just get the dough until it comes together into a ball. I'm going to take and just sprinkle a little flour on my board. If you see this, it's not very smooth and elasticy. It's kind of bumpy looking. That's why I need to knead it. So you just push it through with the palm of your hand, turn it a quarter turn, and you just keep doing this. And as I do knead it, you can start to see that it's getting more and more smooth. And that looks really nice. Now this dough makes 4 flatbreads, so I want to take my knife, or I'm going to use my bench scraper, and I'm going to cut the dough into 4 pieces. And now we're going to put it into some little containers to put into the refrigerator. Now what I have are just these little covered plastic containers that I use, and I've got a paper towel. I'm going to put some olive oil, and I'm just going to run the oil on the inside and then on the top of the lid of each of the bowls. We just want a little thin coating so that as the dough raises, it doesn't stick to the inside of the container. Now I'm going to take each of my little blobs of dough, and I want to take and turn the ends under because I want to make it a nice round ball, just like this. And I'll put 1 in each of the containers. Now these are going to go in the refrigerator for anywhere from about 3 hours up to 24 hours. Now as these rise, they're going to rise very slowly, but it is going to be releasing some carbon dioxide, and you may look in the fridge and you see that one of your lids has sort of popped off. It's no big deal, just put it back on. But it is important that we keep the lid on the dough while it's in the refrigerator. If dough is exposed to air too much, it gets sort of a crust on top of it and it makes it kind of difficult to work with. So if it pops off, just pop it right back on. Now one of the things we want to put on top of this flatbread is some minced rosemary. So I got a couple of sprigs out of the garden, and when you pull the leaves off, you kind of start at the top and just pull them down like this, and they kind of come right off. Now we're going to want to mince this up really, really finely, because we're just going to sprinkle it on top of the bread when the time comes. I'll put that in a little dish. And what I want to have is about a half a teaspoon or so that I can just sprinkle on top of the bread. Now while the flatbread dough is rising in the refrigerator, let's go ahead and make our sun-dried tomato dipping sauce. The reason I like to make this now is because the longer it hangs out, the more those flavors kind of marry and get more intense, so that's what we want. Now for this dipping sauce, it's great if you have a little food processor or a blender of some kind, because we want to really pulverize these ingredients. So I'm going to use my little food processor, and I have a jar. This is about an 8.5 ounce jar of sun-dried tomatoes, and these are packed in oil, and you do want that. So I'm going to put this whole thing into my processor, and then I'm going to mince 2 cloves of garlic. And the reason I'm mincing the garlic in here is I want to make sure that the garlic is really, really fine. And sometimes when you have this many ingredients, it doesn't get chopped up as well, and I don't want anyone biting into a big piece of garlic. And then I have some basil that I picked out of the garden. And I'm just going to take my knife and run a rough cut through that. So that's about 2 tablespoons. I'll put that in. And then I'll put the lid on and I'll process this until it's really smooth. And now I'm going to take it out of the processor bowl, put it into just a little small bowl here. And now I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. Now for a dipping sauce, you do want to have quite a bit of olive oil in it, and this is actually a lot of dipping sauce right here. So I should see just this little thin coating of olive oil on the top. So as I stir that in, if I just stop stirring it for a second, you can see that there's this nice coating of oil right on the top, and that is what I want. And now we just let this sit on the counter and let those flavors develop. Now it's time to get the wood oven fired up. So I've got the kindling and some paper in kind of a teepee shape towards the back of the oven. And then I'm going to let that catch fire. And as that kindling starts to catch, I'm going to slowly start adding other pieces of wood, because I really want to get the oven up to a very high temperature. The thing about cooking in a wood oven is you have to be very aware of the temperature of the oven depending on what it is that you want to cook. Now for a flatbread like this, I want it to be very hot, like about 800 degrees or so at the edge. And then I'm going to take this wonderful tool that I got from Alfresco Imports. It's a metal broom with this metal edge on it, and I want to bring those coals and that fire onto what they call the deck of the oven, and I'm going to let that sit there, those coals and fire, for about 5 minutes, and that's going to start really heating up that bottom of the oven. Now while that's heating up, I've got my pizza peel, and I'm going to be using this to make my flatbread on. So I've got some semolina flour, which I really love using because it kind of acts like little ball bearings and it lets the dough slide really easily. And now here is my flatbread dough. Now I took it out of the refrigerator an hour and a half ago so it could kind of warm up. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch it and press it into a rectangle. Kind of dimple it with my fingertips a little bit and then sprinkle on the rosemary. And now it's time to start baking. So I'm going to take my little brush scraper and I'm going to push the fire off to the side. They actually call that banking the fire. And I'm going to use the brush to kind of scoot as much of those ashes off the deck. And then I always like to check and make sure that the dough is nice and easy to move off of the peel. And then I'm going to slide it right into the oven just like that. And I want to let this sit there for 1 minute. And what's going to happen is that dough is going to heat up because the deck is like about 650 degrees or so. That's what we want to bake this bread on. And then I can use my long tongs, and because the bread has kind of stiffened up, I can snug it right up against the fire, and you'll see it'll start to brown like that. So that's what I do. I just keep moving the bread until it gets just as browned as I would like it on the sides. Now you can see the bread is puffing up. It's not as high as a focaccia, but it's a little higher than a pizza dough. I'm getting some nice color on it, so I just keep moving around. I don't want to get it charred black. I like sort of just a deep, rich color. And then I'm going to take my metal pizza peel that I got at Alfresco Imports, and with my long tongs, I'm going to slide it onto the peel, and I'm going to lift the peel up into the oven, and I'm going to count to 5. And it's just those 5 seconds is all it takes, and you can see how all that heat that's risen in the oven has so beautifully browned the top of that flatbread. Now I actually have a second peel here on my table here because this is the one I'm actually going to cut and serve on. But I want to, while this bread is really hot, I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil on top of it. And the reason I do that is for this Tuscan flatbread, it's always what you do at the end, and that olive oil kind of soaks into the bread a little bit. But the topping here is some kosher salt, and then we just sprinkle that all over the top. And then this is my new pizza cutter that I have, and I love it because it cuts down as opposed to the wheel, which kind of just moves everything off to the side. And I'm going to cut these into some nice long sticks. Now as I bring this in from outside, you can see just how beautifully brown it is. Oh, it tastes so good. Now I actually serve this flatbread right on this peel. That's why I have a couple of them. One that I make the bread or the pizza on, and then one that I serve it on. But we want to get our dipping sauce ready as well. So this has been sitting around for a few hours. Looks fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and spoon some of it out into a smaller dish. So now it's time to taste our delicious bread. Just put it right in here. It's nice and crisp on the top. You can see it's nice and soft in the middle. And I love that hit of rosemary and salt on the top. It's really, really good. Your guests will love it. Now, if you'd like to try this Tuscan flatbread and this delicious dipping sauce at home, just go to our website and go to the Daily Bread show notes, and I'll have the recipes there for you. Don't forget to check out Alfresco Imports. They're the ones that provided the beehive oven for me and those wonderful tools to use when you're using your wood oven. Join us on Facebook. That's where I'm doing a lot of vlogging. And as always, if you have any ideas or questions for me, please send me an email. I'll see you next time.